time, showtime. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the ChannelPro 5-Minute Roundup. A look at news, trends, and tips for the SMB channel in 5 minutes or thereabouts. My name is Rich Freeman. I am executive editor of the ChannelPro Network, also one of your hosts on this program. I am joined this week by your other co-host, as I am every week. His name is Erick Simpson. He is a business transformation and improvement advisor to MSPs and other IT providers. Erick, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Rich, and I can see by your location on my screen that looks like you're back from travel.
I am. I got back last night from a 9-day road trip, as a matter of fact. I was at Channel Pro's first event of the year, and then this week I've been at the CompTIA Communities and Councils Forum in Chicago, which was a terrific event.
So did you, is it like riding a bike, Rich? Because that's quite a stint, 9 days of travel after being kind of, non-traveling, for so long.
It's coming back to me. I'm an old pro. Yeah, it's very much like riding a bicycle, Erick.
Yeah, you just dust off. All right. And we were talking before we went live on the program, and you mentioned that one of the best feelings and values that you got was just getting out there and seeing everybody again. I experienced a little bit of that on my trip last week as well. Just being there with colleagues, friends, partners, vendors, and just pressing the flesh. Being in a room rather than on a screen with folks, huh?
I've seen that twice in 2 weeks, basically, at both our event last week and this CompTIA event this week. It really does feel like there is an appetite out there among people to just get out among other people again, and you could just feel it, the energy level. And it was particularly striking at this CompTIA show because it was a few hundred people and we all kind of know each other, and it really did feel good. And I know it wasn't just me who felt that way. It kind of felt good to be seeing some of these people for the first time in a long while.
Yeah, well, knock on wood. More events are spinning up, and we're both getting invited to them. So, maybe we're rounding a curve here. Maybe we'll actually be able to, be a little bit more human again with each other in the same room or rooms, as it were. So, good stuff.
Knock on wood, indeed. And speaking of good stuff, Erick, let's dive into our top story of the week. This is something. This is based on a story that I published earlier this week, and it was inspired by a couple of different conversations I had with exhibitors at our SMB Forum event last week in Newark, New Jersey. And both those conversations touched on compliance and just sort of flagged an issue for me. Compliance, first of all, not identical to security. Second of all, it is a big and growing market that is here to stay, folks. There are more regulations coming online all the time, and there's no sign that any of the existing ones are going away. And so that means that a lot of businesses out there are going to need help understanding and complying with these regulations. There was some data, in fact, in a Kaseya study, their global MSP benchmark that was published recently. 75% of the MSPs who responded to that study agreed that their clients struggle to meet compliance obligations. 53% strongly agreed that compliance is a struggle. Close to 75% of surveyed MSPs said that they currently provide or are getting ready to provide compliance services. And I guess I'm flagging this particular story on channelpronetwork.com because I want to speak to the other 25%, basically. And I suspect a lot of them are not offering compliance of any kind right now because they are concerned about their ability to do that. As one of the companies that I spoke with at last week's show, Choice Cybersecurity, pointed out to me, there are a lot of MSPs out there. Maybe they have 3 medical practices in their customer base. Those 3 customers are subject to HIPAA requirements. HIPAA is very complex. There's a lot to understand there. But if you've only got 3, 4, 5 customers who are subject to HIPAA, is it really worth your while to invest the kind of time and energy required to understand that regulation, make absolutely sure that you can keep your customers in compliance with the requirements? A lot of MSPs will say no. Kaseya is a great example. Kaseya has a product called Compliance Manager, which was updated quite recently. It is basically designed to allow you to offload some of that expertise requirement onto the software so that you don't need to know HIPAA in that kind of depth in order to offer compliance services effectively. Choice Cybersecurity, who I mentioned before, they are an MSSP these days that are making most of their money, it sounds like, as a sort of white label, outsourced third-party compliance partner to MSPs. And in fact, like I said, they were the ones who pointed out, they work with a lot of people who just don't have, they have a customer, 3-4 customers who are subject to CMMC requirements. The MSP doesn't understand that regulation. It doesn't make financial sense to gain the understanding required. And so here's an opportunity to partner with a third party, get that revenue, add that to your top line, make sure that you're keeping other MSPs who perhaps do have compliance services out of your accounts. So basically, the bottom line is there are ways to get into compliance, even if you don't have deep compliance knowledge. Pretty much every business out there is going to need compliance assistance of some kind. This is a way to increase revenue and protect your accounts. And so I would encourage anyone out there who's not doing compliance right now to investigate those alternatives, those options for getting into compliance without making a giant investment.
Absolutely right, Rich. And the article is very well written. The point that I really took away from it was, you mentioned, hey, you may have a few clients, that need to comply to HIPAA regulatory compliance, but MSPs, and you make this point in the article, they may have clients that have different compliance needs. So you've got HIPAA, you may have PCI over here, you may have something else, CMMC, you may have NIST 800-171 somebody's got to comply to. And the point that you make is really strengthened by the fact that, there is absolutely no way on earth that an MSP that's doing traditional managed IT services is going to be able to maintain the capacity and the competence to help every one of these different types of businesses maintain their regulatory compliance for their specific industries. So yeah, it makes a great case to, partner with someone. And, Steve Ruckovitz and his team at Choice have really built a business around this. And I've known Steve for years. In good, something to mention is Steve was an MSP. That's when I began working with Steve back in the day. So he really understands the challenges that MSPs are going through in general from a business perspective. And then, through this evolution of needing to support and help clients maintain compliance when they've got to not only maintain regulatory compliance, but also comply to requirements in their cyber liability insurance policies and things like that. So, and how do we grow as MSPs? We typically outsource things that we're not really good at until we determine, that's an interesting market. We could probably make a lot of money if we learn to do that ourselves. So I see the evolution of some MSPs migrating into the cybersecurity and MSSP type of business model, and then picking and choosing a vertical that they then can master, if you will, to help that vertical comply. In the meanwhile, they're learning how to do that by partnering with organizations like Choice Cybersecurity and others.
Yeah, it's a great point that there can be an evolution in this kind of market where you really don't have much knowledge in-house when you get started, but over time, as you mature, you can do more and more of that on your own potentially. Well, Eric, one thing I can't really speak to myself right now is how, what the margins look like on compliance services, but paying attention to that kind of thing with respect to the services you offer goes straight to your tip of the week.
Absolutely, Rich. Thanks for the perfect segue. So the tip of the week is to analyze every single service line that you have from a profitability perspective. Many MSPs, when they're first starting out, Rich, will take all of their revenue and kind of lump it into one bucket. This is service revenue. And, here's our blended profit margin, right? So when we're looking at things that way, it really doesn't give us the detail necessary to identify some underperforming services from a profit perspective, and some services that were just killing it. So we've got this blended margin, which may be hiding some underperforming service lines. So normalize your P&L, identify and break out each one of your major service revenue lines. So, managed services, maybe you're selling subscriptions to M365 and other things. Maybe you've got VoIP in there, you've got projects, and identify how profitable you are in everything that you're delivering, and then identify what your desired target profit margin is. So for services like managed services and project labor and things like that, I recommend targeting a 60% profit margin. If you can get 60% on your managed services agreements, you're doing really, really well. For subscriptions and things that you're reselling subscriptions to, sometimes that can vary. Obviously, with Microsoft, we don't have a lot of control over that margin. But for some other services that we are reselling as part of our bundling strategy, we can juice that a little bit. But I would say, Rich, that anything that delivers under 35% profit margin. I'm not talking about hardware resale. I know that that's always going to be very low unless you're a very strategically consultative provider. But any service related offering that we're delivering, anything under 35-40% becomes less interesting to an MSP that is really trying to grow the value of their organization and the profit and their EBITDA, which speaks to, valuation later when it's time to decide whether I'm going to exit and sell my company at the highest valuation, or even if I'm going to grow through acquisition, right? The higher my EBITDA, the more valuable my organization is.
It's interesting, Eric. I am waxing nostalgic as you're talking about this, because this reminds me of a conversation we had really when we first met, which has got to be like 15 years ago. And one of the things you used to say was, once a year, you got to sit down, you got to look at your customer base, divide them up into the A's, the B's, and the C's, and get rid of the C's, right?
Yep.
And it's pretty similar with services. Essentially, it's the same principle that you're talking about. It's kind of divvy them up into different buckets. The low margin ones, get rid of them.
Yeah, because just like your C customers that are, they're sucking your time away from spending time with your A and B clients that are going to spend more money and be more strategic with you, these services as well, they're just robbing you of labor time that you could be applying to, hey, maybe spinning up a new compliance offering, right? At a very high margin. You mentioned earlier, I don't know what the margins are for these things. I'll say they're very high margin.
There you go. All right. More of that, less of the low margin stuff. That leaves us with time for just one more story this week. Stay with me as this gets progressively stranger and stranger. So it begins with the fact that there is a new edible, a new cannabis-infused edible on the market. These days, cannabis-infused edibles are legal in most states in the country. Nothing too unusual about that. This one's a little bit more unusual because it comes to you from Mike Tyson. Gets a little bit more unusual still because it is shaped like a human ear. And it is shaped like a human ear with a bite taken out of it, because we remember in 1997, Iron Mike Tyson bit off a little bit of Evander Holyfield's ear. So the product is called Mike Bites, a cannabis edible shaped like an ear in honor of the Evander Holyfield incident. And here is what Mike had to say in promoting this on his Twitter account recently, quote unquote, "These ears actually taste good." So plenty of time for Father's Day or Mother's Day. Get on it now, folks. Mike Bites, available wherever finer edibles are sold.
These ears taste great. Thanks, Evander. My poor attempt at a Mike Tyson impression.
Not bad. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us. That's all the time we've got this week on the 5-Minute Roundup. We're going to be back again next week with another episode. You know what? We are both a video and a podcast these days. If you're watching the video, but you like podcasts, you will find us anywhere you find podcasts, pretty much. Google, Apple, Spotify, you name it. we're going to be there. Please find us, become a subscriber, rate and review so that other folks like yourself can find us as well. If you are listening to the podcast, but you want to check us out on video, easiest thing to do is go to the ChannelPro Network channel on YouTube. You'll find the show there. You can subscribe there as well. If you also click the little bell icon, you'll get notified when the new episodes become available. You can read the article we were referring to before about compliance being for everyone on channelpronetwork.com, where you will also find all sorts of other great content going up for you every day there. So please visit daily. If you want to learn more about Erick and the work that he does with his clients, you want to visit ericksimpson.com. That is ERICK Simpson.com. So once again, we thank you for joining us, folks. We will be back again in a week with another episode. Until then, please enjoy the rest of your week. Erick and I are enjoying the rest of your week already.